Thanks for joining. There's about 50 of us. This is obviously live and raw. So welcome to the FSC Connect. This is the second week of us doing this. And the intent around FSC Connect was all about helping to keep and support, keep the agenda going, support our members. But in unlike last week, which was very much a week on what's the FSC been doing and very much an industry related conversation, this week is very much about we're all in this pretty strange other world. It's called in your bubble, which is a really nice way to say we're all locked away and we can't go anywhere. And whoever we started in our bubble with, we have to be there for the whole duration, which of course provides its own joys and challenges, particularly if you've got significant others, rugrats, pets, blah, 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 running around your feet. And so we thought that this week would be really, really helpful to have a broader conversation around mental health, mental well-being, kind of keeping you safe in your bubble beyond what you do in your gainful employment. And so in that context, absolutely delighted. We've had a fantastic relationship with Jazz Thornton now for a number of years and previously at conference. So really delighted that she agreed to come out of her virtual bubble and join us in our broad bubble to kind of do a couple of things, talk to us a bit about her world, a bit about how do you generally think about coping in times like this. And as a soon-to-be best-selling author, we'll talk a little bit about her book a little later, Stop Surviving, Start Fighting. And like with all of these things, there's an opportunity to have some dialogue and some questions. So at the bottom of your bar, if you're not a Zoom user, used to it, there's a chat session. Feel free to chat away. There's also a Q&A button. Feel free to ask some Q&As. Jazz, I'm going to hand over in a moment to, and as we go through, there'll be some Q&A time in 10, 15 minutes, and we'll see how we go. Like I say, it is second week, so we've still got our training wheels on, but really appreciate the 60 or 70 odd people who've joined us, and particularly to Jazz. So Jazz, welcome, and over to you. Tell us how you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm doing well. This whole isolation thing has been very interesting. I actually moved house 24 hours before the lockdown started. So it was a bit of a whirlwind for me, but I have got back into a routine, and so I'm doing okay. I'm living with a friend of mine, and I'm kind of navigating working. My main kind of source of work was itinerant speaking, so speaking at conferences, and obviously that involves arenas and rooms of people, so that's all been cancelled until about July. So I've been finding new things and new projects, which has been really exciting. But I've also done a lot of research and a lot of different conference, like online Zoom conferences with people now. And there's a few kind of key themes that seem to be coming up at the moment with going through COVID. And I think you guys working in the financial industries are in a very interesting position where we obviously have all of the essential services, but the key thing that is being affected alongside health is the economy. And one of the biggest players in mental health and people struggling with mental health in the older generation is financial instability. And so in this time that we have, in this moment that we're in, there is going to be a lot going on in your industry and a lot going on for the people that you're working with and within your teams. But also for yourselves who are in these bubbles. And, you know, the kind of key things that I've seen coming across is one that we've heard a lot, is that there's a lot of anxiety that people are dealing with about the future, and if they've got jobs to go back to, or what it's even going to look like. Kids are starting to gauge that as well and get quite anxious. And there's obviously a lot of fear about what's happening, and a lot of people also feeling really alone and feeling, while we're physically isolated, they're also feeling emotionally and socially isolated. But you see, what I have begun to discover through this time is that we're physically isolated, but we're not socially isolated. And I'm starting to see a community of people in our country who are starting to gather together, who are starting to pick up the phone and connect and jump on FaceTime and jump on Zoom and do all of these things so that while we are physically isolated, we're still connecting in with people. And I think when it comes to the teams that you are working with and the people that are facing financial difficulties, I think going back to the basic question of how we learnt how to do relationship of how are you, and actually meaning it is going to go a long way in this time. I know it sounds super basic, but when you think about it, when you are walking down the corridor and you see someone, if like the conversation always goes, hey, how are you? Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you? Move on with your day. Like that's how we've grown up. That's how we understand how the beginning of relationship kind of starts, is this one question that I feel like for a long time didn't really hold meaning. Like we didn't know what to do if people asked how you were and you were just like, I don't know who I am. We don't know how to respond to that. And so now I think is a time more than ever that when you're picking up the phone and you're on FaceTime or in Zoom meetings to your staff, to your people that are in faculty, but also to the people that are working alongside you and that you're working for, is that we go back to that basic of literally just asking people how they're doing and taking the time to listen and taking the time to respond, because that's one thing that we do have at the moment is time. And I've loved walking around. I live very close to Cornwall Park here in Auckland, and so that's been my bubble place where I can go for a walk every day. And I have seen a lot of men and with their families out that I don't think I would have ever seen out on a normal day. And I think a really cool thing to remember is that this time and what's happening right now, what your kids are going to remember more than anything, hopefully, is the time that they got to spend with you. Is the time that they got to spend uninterrupted with their mum and dad, their sibling, whatever it is that, I think life is so busy and we are consistently out and about and running from meeting to meeting. And there's obviously a lot going on and it's hard for everyone. But being able to look at this as an opportunity to when it hits, 5 p.m. or whenever you would usually finish work, to switch off and to go spend time with your kids, to go spend time with your family and really kind of use that time to be able to do that. Something I've personally been doing to keep myself well during this time is making a routine and a schedule and sticking to it, because it's really easy when you are home and doing, kind of not having to go into the office and not having that accountability to just kind of slide into Netflix or, do that kind of thing. But I've been waking up at the same time every day, getting coffee, going and sitting outside when it's not raining and sticking to the same schedule, scheduling in my meetings and stuff, but also scheduling in things like lunch and dinner, which sounds really simple, but when you're working from home, I found the first week I didn't have lunch until like 5 p.m. because everything kind of merged in. So creating that schedule for your own well-being is so, so, so important. And then your families can obviously follow suit with that because your kids are watching. They're watching how you respond during this time. And we want to be able to exit this crazy COVID-19 time with our kids remembering the time that we spent with them, the family time, the connection time, and not remembering just stress and anxiety and fear, which is obviously there. And that's why it's really important that we are learning how to look after ourselves, but also realizing that there is a responsibility as well for all of the people in your individual organizations. I really challenge you that when you are starting every meeting or you are starting any conversation with people, that you are the people that will ask those 3 words, how are you, and actually mean it, because everyone needs that at the moment. Everyone is isolated. There are a lot of people feeling alone. And we know that mental health rates tend to rocket when it comes to financial instability and insecurity. So now more than ever is the time to be having those conversations and the time to be asking those questions and not being afraid of what's going to come out of people's mouths or being afraid of the answer, but just being there as a colleague, as a boss, as a friend, whatever it is, that now more than ever is so important. And obviously looking ahead to when we get down to level 3, which hopefully is going to be soon. I don't know what the future holds. It's very uncertain. And, for someone like me whose entire job is based around traveling the world, I was supposed to be in Africa right now and then to the US and the UK, working on a new TV show, but all of that's, being postponed. And so there's this uncertainty across the board for everyone. But what we do know is that we're not in this alone, and that the best thing that we can do is, it depends obviously on how you best respond to things. I personally am only watching the news once a day and then I switch it off, because there is nothing like being filled with notifications of everything going wrong to fill you with anxiety. So, that kind of thing of checking in on the news once a day and just so you can keep up to date but not be overwhelmed by it is really important. I know probably in your industries you need to be quite on top of this kind of thing, but do make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well during this time. That is, I think, one of the most important things, because if you can take care of yourself, then it's going to make it a lot easier for you to be able to take care of your teams and your colleagues and the people that you are representing and dealing with. This is a troubling time, and no one can do it by themselves, but that's why we really are all in this together, and why people at the FSC are putting things like this on, so that people don't feel like they're having to figure this out and battle it by themselves. As we like to do in New Zealand, we like to have the she'll be right attitude and DIY, figure it out ourselves, but this isn't a time where we do that. This is a time that we lean on each other and we engage and we try and figure out how to best move forward. But I believe that Richard, we're going into a bit of a Q&A. So if you guys do have any questions that you want to ask at all around mental health, well-being, anything, you can do that. But I will bring Richard back on if he is still there. Yeah.
Hello, Jazz. Here
Hi.
I am. Hey, so folks, feel free to ask away questions either on the Q&A tab or on the chat tab. We've got a question here, Jazz, for you. Tea and coffee consumption, Jazz, has it increased and is it good for you?
Look, mine has actually decreased, and I think that's because I'm not at like 50 coffee meetings a day. You know how every time you have a meeting, usually it involves coffee. Mine has actually decreased, but it's not good for you to have increased. Tea, I'm not so sure about. Maybe an increase is good. Do not increase your coffee intake. It is not good for anyone.
Stay off the caffeine. I like your comment around kind of create normal, normal, having a game plan and a daily schedule and so on, and that your kids or your bubble mates kind of take their cue, which of course is a bit hard. But for those of us who are either in kind of management or leadership roles or team leading roles, I guess we can help frame people with that. And there are a bunch of financial advisors on the phone as well, who are obviously running businesses like most of us are, which is one business but in many different locations. Any other thoughts on that kind of creating normal?
I think, look, this is going to sound so obvious and hygienic, but it's also something that so many people are not doing, is like the basics of getting up, showering and getting dressed every day is what can help get your mind into work mode and scheduling and just doing things. It's the easiest thing to stay in your track pants or stay in your pajamas because you're home. Why not? But to be able to create that kind of structure routine that can keep you mentally sane, going back to the basics as if you were going to work, not to the extent of wearing like a suit and tie, but getting up and getting changed, you will be surprised at the amaze of good that will do for your productivity.
Yeah. So just on productivity, right, which we were chatting in a meeting earlier today, it kind of feels in many ways that for those who are in essential services and are working, it's actually never been busier. And so productivity, because of technology like this and the lack of needing to get on a train or a bus or whatever, um, what's your lens on that? Because of course, the flip on that is if people were in jobs or in roles, there'd likely be a bunch of anxiety, particularly if you weren't in the essential services field, about whether they'll be opening again or in what kind of format. So it's almost like a two-pronged approach. The people who are busy are now crazy busy, and those that are not, are the ones perhaps we're servicing, looking after, providing guidance and advice to.
I think that, to address the first point of you guys will be a lot busier than you've probably ever been. I think that it is still so insanely important that as much as you can, I know that, there's going to be times where this is altered and changed, but trying to stick to your work hours as much as you can, because when you're at home, it's going to be really easy for 5 o'clock to roll around and you're still working, and 6 and 7 and 8 and you're still on the phone. Is that as much as you can when it comes to that routine and the increased productivity, is think of the fact you're not having to move around between meetings, you're not having to get in an Ubers or get in cars and drive like places, that it's really important as much as you can to try and stick within your work hours and try to not go over. But also, the people that you're working with and the businesses that you're working with that will be on the opposite ends of the spectrum. That's going to be, where it is going to be really important to check in and to be doing, I guess, everything that you can whilst we're in this lockdown, so that when we come out, you can come out running rather than come out trying to dig your way and find new things to do, but doing as much as you can so that you're kind of, running at it so that you can take off when things relaunch. But obviously I'm not in the full business world as such, but I do know that those two things are key to any business, those people who are working ridiculous hours at the moment, and also those who have dropped significantly in business.
Thanks, Jazz. Some great questions coming through. So a question from Brett. Hi, Jazz. I have some staff who live alone and may be feeling more isolated than others. Do you have any specific strategies for someone living alone?
I think, people who are living alone are definitely going to be feeling this a lot more. I think that if it's people in your team, something that you can do to help them is to organize someone within your team to be calling them every day. It can be a different person every day, but just for them to know that even though they're physically by themselves, that there are still people that are there and that are checking in on them. And even if, once every couple of days, it can be without it being purely work focused. I know I've got into the habit of only calling people when I need something, and I've started to actually just find the friends who are living alone, or find the people that are living alone, and just call and see how they're doing with their day, because they're missing all of those basic conversations that keep anyone sane at the water cooler or whatever it is. So delegating people in your team to do that, I think, is really important. But also encouraging the person themselves who is living alone to not sit and wait for people to contact, but also to schedule in, coffee dates with friends, or checking in, setting in meetings at specific times in the day to make sure that they are able to get up and get on task and be focused is really important. But I think connection is going to be the biggest thing for those who are living alone, and you can do that as in teams of people.
So just further to that one, this is from David. How do you best respond if someone gives you a response that they actually mean by breaking down and telling you that they're not coping at all?
I think that the best thing for you to do when that happens, and they say that they're not coping, you must respond, because for them it will be a very significant thing for them to finally admit that they're not actually doing okay. And at the moment, it's going to sound like this is what we tell the teenagers, but this is a line that is open to everyone. One, see if there's anything that you can do to help. It might be, taking a couple of tasks off and delegating if you can, but also seeing if they can schedule a virtual session with their GP, getting practical in that sense. If they're really struggling and are breaking down in that sense, it would be really good to get them any kind of professional support. And 1737 is a number you should all know. Write it down if you don't know it. It's our 24/7 online counselling and over text counselling service, and anyone, any age can access it, and that'll just give them an extra point of call to be able to get support if they're feeling overwhelmed at any time of the day. So that's probably the two main things that I would suggest.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jazz. Great question from Debbie. How important is diet in times like this?
Very important. I think obviously don't be like insanely strict on yourself, but the nutrition that you're getting in, there's so much scientific evidence around your ability to be clear-headed and productive and staying mentally on top of your game is huge to do with nutrition. So if you're just filling yourself with crappy food and you feel crap, you need to adjust your diet. And a lot of people will be struggling with that. I personally am just getting HelloFresh delivered because I don't know how to cook that well. So it's forcing me to learn. But it is really important and something that for both you and your family, you need to stay on top of your game as much as you can. Not intensely, like don't go to the other end of the spectrum, but just, keeping up nutrition. And if you're feeling really cloudy and down, let that be one of the first things that you check is, have you had water today? And the simple things like that. But very important.
Because it's kind of interesting, right? The Twitter's filled with people who never baked anything are now bakers, people who are fruit juice makers or soup makers or whatever. I mean, in many ways, the gift of time, notwithstanding some of the stresses we're talking about, the gift of time is about the gift of challenging and doing new stuff, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've literally not really cooked in my life. I never got taught how to. And now I would Uber Eats all the time and I can't do that anymore. So I now have the time because I'm not traveling, after work to actually attempt to cook. So far I haven't burned down the kitchen, so we're doing well. But yeah.
Fantastic. I'm going to come back to the health and wealth link in a moment, but a question from Sharon. Hi, Jess. Thanks for sharing with us today. As we start to think about coming out of level 4, how do we help our teams feel comfortable interacting with people again and perhaps removing any possible fear?
Oh, that's a really good one. I think it's going to be a really interesting time for us all to be, interacting, and there will be a lot of fear from a lot of people because we've kind of been plastered with fear as soon as lockdown started around don't interact with people, don't do this, don't do that. But I think as long as you as businesses are sticking to the obvious guidelines of, just social distancing and all of that kind of thing, but maybe just making it super clear to all of your staff as much as you can what's going to stamp out fear for a lot of people is knowledge that you are taking this seriously. And knowledge that there is what they can have laid out clearly, then that will start to eliminate a lot of fear for people. You have to have grace and you will have to give people time.
We've always promised these are short and sharp and to the point, and you've been fantastic. 2 last questions. The link between financial insecurity and stress and kind of the whole mental health piece. Do you maybe want to just talk a bit more about that one?
Link between them is significant. We see a lot of our so I don't know if a lot of you guys know this, but our suicide statistics, 68% of our suicides were middle-aged men.
And Jazz, you've just written your first book, Stop Surviving, Start Fighting, which when I popped into a search engine earlier today kind of came out massively. This is your free plug opportunity. How's the book going? And when's your book tour going to start?
The book is going really well. I was actually kind of gutted, to be honest. I had been working on it for all of last year, and it was supposed to have a big launch party, and obviously it was going into all the stores, and there were thousands of pre-orders, and then everything got locked down. But in saying that, thankfully I recorded the audiobook, and it was put on Kindle as well, and the book is really my journey from going from suicidal to hopeful, and my how I did that. And we've had huge responses from around the world. It's hit top charts in 8 countries, which is really exciting. But yeah, it's been really good. I'm hoping to do some kind of book tour when I get out of, well, we all get out of isolation, and when people start receiving their physical copies of it. But yeah, it was a crazy process writing it, and to see it going out into the world now is pretty awesome.
And also you've got Jessica's Tree sitting on the NZ Herald site, which did you produce that or direct that?
Yeah, I directed it. I pitched the idea in 2017, and then it got picked up and created. So that is about a young girl who did take her life and how we can respond differently to suicide. And then I've also got, I think you know about this, Richard, I'm not sure, a feature movie called The Girl on the Bridge that's coming out later this year about my story as well. So that's not out yet, but it will be.
Cool.
So there's a lot happening.
Cool. Hey, well, that's absolutely awesome, and really appreciate you coming online. Just picking up that last piece when we had a bit of a freeze, that kind of whole question around the link between mental health and financial security or insecurity is one that's completely real, and I know the advice community on the phone and those that support them completely get it, and the data is pretty stark. If you get an advisor and you have a coach and you have a guide and you've made some good decisions and you're confident about them, you are so much better placed than those that don't when a rainy day comes. And as I was saying to someone earlier this week, it feels like we're in the 1 in 100-year flood, which you never expect to happen. But, you know, we all now know about Spanish flu of 1918 and the great COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, which we're obviously still living through. So, Jazz, a huge thank you to you. We have recorded this session. We will also send out the links in terms of your book and the NZ Herald contribute. And on behalf of all of the FSC broad community, huge thank you. Wish you well on your journey. And we look forward to reading your book and ultimately seeing the movie. But I think the practical tips have been really, really most beneficial, because we're all kind of living that world yesterday, today, next week, and the last 3 weeks. So on behalf of all of us here, here is a virtual clap for you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. See ya.
Cheers. Bye now.